And because there is so much new audience out there, Dannion, if you could, give us a description of what happened to you as a basis for where we're going here.
Okay. First, I'd like to say that every new person listening to the Art Bell Show has made a smart move. He's a terrific person. He covers a broad range of subjects, and he's very conservative and very straightforward, but he's not afraid to face any issues. I'm Dannion Brinkley.
Checks in the mail.
Well, it's still true, Art. You're one of the best. But I'm just a typical everyday guy from South Carolina who in 1975 spent the early part of his life basically as a complete jerk, who had no interest in metaphysics or spiritual things, religion, or any of that kind of business. And then I never would have thought about it till one afternoon in September I was talking on the telephone. And just like anyone would talk on the telephone, I heard a little thunder, and I decided to get off of the phone, and all of a sudden, lightning struck the phone line. It came down the phone line. It hit me in the neck. It went down my spine. It welded nails to the heels of my shoes to the nails in the floor. It throws me in the air, suspends me in the air, and slams me back down.
It welded your shoes to the floor.
Well, the key was if I had Bass-Weegens on, which in those days they nailed the heels.
Right.
And those nails just happened to be over nails that held the flooring down in the house.
Yeah, lightning seeks ground.
And it grounded itself, and it welded the shoes, or I would have exploded. It was somewhere around 180,000 volts.
Wow.
Well, I mean, this is what happened. All of a sudden, I'm slammed back down. I'd never heard of near-death experience. I'm burning. I'm on fire. I don't know what to do and which way to go. And I'd never heard of near-death experience, and I wouldn't have believed it if someone had told it to me. But then I had it. All of a sudden, I'm in this blue-gray place from burning, searing pain, not knowing what to do, which way to go, how to react, just not trying, but trying desperately to get my bearings.
Conscious at that point?
Oh, I was conscious. You never lose conscious.
To have that much pain, remember that pain, you would have had to have been conscious.
Yeah, you never, you're always conscious. It doesn't happen, you're always conscious. Then I'm floating. I roll over, I see myself lying across the bed. I hear my wife telling me that lightning had struck very near the house. The guy on the other end of the phone comes over. To give you an impact of that, I was dead for 28 minutes. No pulse, no respiration, no heartbeat.
28 minutes?
Mm-hmm. When it says an admission slip into the hospital, it says patient unconscious, patient not breathing, patient no EKG. And
that's usually called patient dead.
Yeah, exactly, but they don't ever say that in hospitals.
Uh-huh.
That's not something that they ever say, even when you're having an autopsy, they still don't say it.
But that's on your hospital record.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's no question. It happened at a medical university. I have like 176 pages. The things that happened to me weren't just, happened in the woods somewhere. I was struck by lightning. I was dead for 28 minutes. I was completely paralyzed for 6 days. I was partially paralyzed for 7 months. It took me 2 years to learn to walk and feed myself, and I lost more than 60 pounds. And there's medical records of it every day. It's not like, I just came up out of the woods one day with this story.
Well, did you ask any of the medical people? I mean, after 28 minutes, Dannion, there should have been irreversible brain damage at room temperature.
Well, it's a lot of true, and, a lot of times people say there's oxygen brain deprivation that causes near-death experiences, and after 5 minutes you have brain damage. But I never argue that point because, that could be part of my problem. But the key is that they're resuscitating people now, Art, up to 3 hours. The old adage of 5 minutes to the brain is just not true anymore because of ventilators, because of things that you can do, because of determining where the body is, and because we have such advancements in cardiopulmonary resuscitation that the point of death or the moment of death is no longer as stable as the 5-minute theorem that was advanced about 15 years ago. People have to remember that the near-death experience, Art, is a byproduct of the advancement of cardiopulmonary resuscitation in the world of medicine. Why people are having this is because it's being so widespread is because of the advancement of medicine. So, everyone knows that I am pro-medicine in some aspects, and I'm very adverse to medicine in other aspects in dealing with extended life by any means necessary. I'm an advocate of living wills and AMAs because I think it's really important to the fact that I've been struck by lightning, I've been clinically dead. I did the standard system that would occur. I floated above myself. I watched them work on me. I watched the amazement that comes in seeing yourself as a spiritual being. I watched them load me in the ambulance. A tunnel forms. I move down this tunnel. I come into the place of the most awesome, bright, brilliant, beautiful light. What is the amazing part about it is people always say who've had this experience that they're always surrounded by love. The key is that's them feeling themselves again. It's not some external force. It's you feeling you. That love and great comfort and great peace. And why? Because all of a sudden, for me, Art, I began to look at the system. Not so much that I was afraid of anything that was going on because it was safe, but the system of how you come into the light, that you're met by someone that you feel safe with. And a lot of people say they're met by relatives, and you hear this continuously in the process.
Dannion, let me ask you a question. When you began the process of being outside your body and observing your body and then the tunnel and all the rest of it, were you able during that time to sort of consciously think yourself, well, gee, look at me, I guess I'm dying, they're trying to bring me back, but I'm dying, and I wonder where I'm going, and isn't it strange that I'm up here? And in other words, have a kind of a conversation with yourself, that kind of consciousness?
Absolutely.
Yes?
Yes. You're watching it. You're never thinking that you're dead.
Were you scared?
Absolutely not. I mean, once that happened, once I lifted out of my body, there was no fear whatsoever. All of a sudden, it's like returning to the state of consciousness that you began. The whole nature of the near-death experience is going home.
Did you want to come back?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
I wouldn't. When I went through this, Art, I went through what I think is the single most important aspects of the near-death experience. And I write about it in both Saved by the Light and At Peace in the Light, and more in At Peace in the Light. The panoramic life review, a lot of times people ask me, they say, Dannion, what gives you such a confidence that there's a life after death and da-da-da, things like that? And I said, I can tell you the answer to that. I went. When they said I was dead, that's the furthest thing I was. I was alive. And I tranced and moved through whole systems and levels of consciousness. But where is my stability? You will have what's called the panoramic life review. There was a lot of things I saw, Art, on the other side that I had never seen before. I had no ability to comprehend it, how it worked, or what it was. But this part, you will begin to feel after you've been greeted on the other side and you acclimate yourself to it. You will begin to feel all the childlike emotions that you've had. Then you will form opinions of them, and then all of a sudden you will have a panoramic life review.
Was it a solid world, this place where you went? Did you see things and people? Did they appear to you as they do here, translucently? How was it the same? Can you describe where you were?
We are light beings. The place that I was, I had a form, but it's like something crushed crystal, like thousands of crystals reflecting and refracting, just like prisms. And your energy and I saw other beings. But how you communicate and how all that goes on is in waves of light. You are more real over there than you are over here.
Really?
More real.
This is the illusion.
There is no question about it in the context of which we're discussing this. Let me get the panoramic life in, Art.
Yes, please.
The panoramic life review is the single most point that all of us can change our lives by. You know, you can hear enough near-death experiences till you want to throw up, or you can listen to it. What good is it to know about it, but how can you apply it to your life? The confidence that I have of what I saw on the other side, if I had never had the visions, which, you know, in Saved by the Light I wrote, and my history is 20 years of when I met Dr. Moody and I met the early researchers, I told them everything that had happened, and I went to Crystal Cities, the events that I saw that I never knew were the future. You know, and the most recent one is the second nuclear accident, which has occurred in Norway, and these things are so documented for 20 years that they keep unfolding. That had a certain amount of impact on the credibility of Dannion Brinkley and his near-death experience. But what I think had the most was I saw my life pass before me. I not only witnessed every single event that from if you think that you missed the leaves rustling outside of your window when you lay in a crib at 2 years old, you're foolish. We record everything I literally saw every event and everything that happened in my life. And even more important than that, I literally became every person that I had encountered and felt the direct results of my interaction between me and that person.
Oh, my God.
And I got to feel, because my first 25 years, the biggest jackass, the most belligerent, obnoxious person that you would ever want to meet, you know. And
I'm recalling our earlier interview, Dannion, and check me if I'm wrong, and I'm going to be really wrong here, but I recall you telling me that in your early life, you've killed.
Yeah.
Now, having, you know, I wrote a book, Dannion, and that was painful enough. That was like revisiting my whole life. It was very painful. But
right.
At the level of revisiting your early life that you're talking about, it must have been a terror.
Well, it had its moments. But you know what, Art? When you look at your life, because I was in the Southeast Asian business, I worked for various government agencies. You know, we lived in the world of proxy wars, and we fought clandestine warfare, which is what we do now. And I was just a small little fragment of that, but I operated in S&D, search and destroy teams, or extraction teams, or I did logistical support for those things, and I started at 19 years old. And I worked in operations under contract, just like there's a lot of Dannion Brinkleys out in the world. Most of them are crazier than I am, but there's still a lot of them out there. And I lived in a world where I thought I was protecting Mom and apple pie and things like that. I now know I was a part of the biggest deception that we've ever perpetrated on the American people. But when you go back and look at it, when you have a panoramic life review, you will become the person. So I got to feel the anguish, frustration, humiliation, pain, and everything that I brought on everybody. But the key is this, Art.
Dannion, have you ever heard from your old bosses? I'm sure they've heard what you've had to say.
Yeah, well, you know, I never push it to the point where I expose something that, you know, I change things just slightly. Because
Would cause them discomfort.
Yeah, absolutely, because first you take oaths of silence, and second, the government works in very strange and mysterious ways when they want you not to talk. My problem is this. I'm never betraying anything. You know, I don't want to live in that world. Mm-hmm. The war I fight now is for the quality of the final days of those people who are leaving this world. The war I fight now is that no one dies alone in this country, and I've recruited thousands and thousands of hospice volunteers, and I do lectures and seminars on that, and I believe that the war that I'm fighting now, that no one dies alone in this country, and the quality of life so we have families that are able to commit closure, because we're caught up in a situation where everybody's so afraid of death because of institutions, governments, and religions just lying, that you become so frightened that you will do anything in the world to keep that loved one alive one more day, whereas that you're doing such an injustice. And as all these years have passed and all the people who've done research on the near-death experience, they never seem to really commit to where it really matters in the quality of life in the final days.
Quick answer. Near-death experience, you were there twice. Does a person or a soul or an entity or a light have a choice about coming back? Can you say, I want to go back, or forget that, leave the body, I'm out of here?
A lot of people say they're given a choice. But a lot of times I don't like those people. Because if I was given a choice, Art, you would have never got me to come back. And if those beings of light would have given me any inkling that I was going to ever return, I would have been figuring out a way from the get-go to keep from having to come back.
Why do you think you did, Dannion?
Well, I think it was because people ask me all the time, Dannion, why do you think you were chosen to bring about this information and to build the centers, the things that I work on, and to deal with the health care issues, which is what they told me.
You see so much death, Dannion. You said 100 and how many?
51.
151 people you've taken there.
And I live there every day. It's my life.
Isn't it hard? I
No.
mean, isn't there a human side of it that's hard, even though you know what's on the other side and you're helping them?
The hard part is for the family members who have to go on afterwards. Bereavement. It's hard for the people who wish they just would have had the 5 more minutes. What people forget that it's heaven or the spiritual world that's gaining that person. That we may be losing them, but the spiritual world is gaining that person. Mm-hmm. And in that simple moment, Art, and the key to where 80 million Americans are now as baby boomers, losing moms and dads, aunts and uncles, and brothers and sisters, cancer, AIDS, these kinds of things.
Sure.
We must become aware we must be able to handle it like in At Peace in the Light. I dedicated the book to baby boomers. So as we face our own mortality, we must help those who we love and who have loved us face theirs. These are wondrous, mystical moments when a person can sit with someone and they can be there. And as they're there, they begin to discover the magical wonderment of that they are spiritual beings, that yes, the body does, biological shutdown and neurological shutdown does occur, but the twinkle in that person's eye and the wonderment of the conversations in those final days both grow, and you create closure, Art. We have a responsibility, every one of us that has the ability to speak and has a forum, and I'm lucky that I have sold millions and millions of books all over the world, and I lecture all the time about the quality of the final days. We have this responsibility because we're in that age group.
All right, Dannion, I've got several questions. Hold it right there. Relax. We'll be back to you. We're at the top of the hour. Dannion Brinkley is my guest at Peace in the Light, his latest book. And, boy, do I have a lot of questions. I bet you do, too. Stay right there. This is Dreamland. The lines. That thing is always a semi-lie when it says we continue with your calls. We'll get to calls. I'm Art Bell. This is Dreamland. Dannion Brinkley back again. Dannion?
Yes.
I've got something I want to run by you. In America right now, there is a great controversy about how we can end our lives and whether we can end them a bit prematurely with the aid of a doctor. And I want to run this by you, Dannion. My wife said something to me once, and I guess every couple talks about death every now and then, the nature of, and all the rest of it. And I've always sort of maintained that whose life is it anyway, and if I were in a great deal of pain and I had a terminal disease, that I might choose an early out, that I might choose a way out at the last minute to avoid all that pain at the end. And my wife said something to me that I've never forgotten. She said, "Oh, no. No, you can't do that. You have to go through what you were meant to go through, and if you don't, there are sort of cosmic repercussions. In other words, you've got to suffer and go through that pain. You were meant to go through it." What is your view about this?
Well, I have to agree with her.
Really?
I am not an advocate of euthanasia. I mean, I will not, excuse me, I believe that everyone has their own right. Once you leave this world, Art, and you realize that you are not a poor, pitiful little human trying to have a mystical experience, you're a great and powerful spiritual being trying to have a human experience. We choose to come here and are chosen to come here, and we are to endure a certain period of time, and we are here to handle a job. It's like when a soldier retires and takes his uniform off, that's the same as death to me. He may be dead as a soldier, but he returns to his spiritual life. Now imagine, a person comes here. All this pain that they're going through, people say, well, they always were great people. They never did anything to anybody, but they ate a pound of bacon every morning for breakfast. So where a person finds herself biologically and neurologically has a lot to do with the quality of care of this body which they have occupied during this earth life experience. Mm-hmm. Now, who's responsible for that? What I believe, without any question, and like I keep repeating, but I'm not really trying to say buy Dannion Brinkley books, but I am. What I keep repeating in that Peace in the Light is how you should look at the body, how you should look at your perspective on it, and then to make the decision. When you realize that how powerful a spiritual being you are, what a hero it was that you even chose to come here, and only the champions come. Every one of us is a hero. When you come, then that decision truly belongs to you, because I'm not going to tell anybody what to do, because I'm just not. But I will stay as long as I'm supposed to. I don't believe in artificial ways of keeping people alive. I believe the natural process will take its course, and that's what we should do. But I'm not going to say you can't.
And yet, though, your own experience, artificially, in effect, kept alive, or brought back anyway.
Brought back.
Surely without that intervention, you would not have come back, right?
Yeah, don't you hate it?
Well, it depends on how you look at it. I mean, that may be part of the great thread of time and happenings that you've got to live out.
Well, I mean, I'm here doing that, and I realize it as commonly as my own breath that I breathe. It is the value of breath that is the most important. People have to understand that how you breathe. What is the value of breath, and why are you to hold on to that last breath? And religions, governments, and institutions have us go into thinking that we're holding on to this last breath so we don't all go to hell. You know, I come from the Deep South, and everybody's going to hell where I come from because of fundamentalism and that kind of thought pattern. But what you have to realize is 50% of the breath you breathe is for you. The other 50% is for spirit. When you breathe air into your nostrils, you breathe it in, it fills your lungs, but it also fills your sinus cavities. As it does that, it activates the brain. The brain activates and attaches itself to the mind. The mind activates to the universal consciousness, and then spirit sprinkles little, you know, when you go to get yogurt, you get those little candy things, those little different flavored things on the top of it.
Yes.
And that spirit adds its magic, and then you breathe back into the world. So the way that spirit enters this world is through the breathing process, and each breath, they estimate you breathe about 500 million breaths in a lifetime. Why suicide became such a condemnational psychology was because every breath, and literally the universe, has to readjust itself when a person takes that breath away from themselves before that chosen time.
So the answer is don't do it.
Well, the answer is that I wholeheartedly disagree with people doing it, but I am not the person to tell anyone that they should. Now, I'll give you a study by Dr. Bruce Grayson, who was at the University of Storr in Connecticut, and he was the psychiatrist on the duty during the night, and people who would come in would attempt suicide. People who had attempted suicide, this is like 460 people, Art,
yes,
who had attempted suicide. Of those who had no near-death experience or any form of it, went on to attempt it 3 more times or until they succeeded. Those people who had some form of the near-death experience, not a single one of them ever did. Once you touch the other side, or it touches you, you find that you are a hero, that this is your job, that you've come and chosen to live in this particular time, in this particular event, and you are to do the best you can to maintain this system that you have called the body and to get your job done.
All right, Dannion, question. Of those that clinically die and come back, what percentage, roughly, do you think has a near-death experience?
Well, they estimate that some 13 million Americans have had some form. I would say that it was really roughly maybe 8 to 10 million, and I think 40% of the people who are resuscitated have some form of the near-death experience.
40%. Any idea why? In other words, why is there a difference? Why is it not universal? That's a good question. Why do some go and not experience that? Just blackness or no remembrance of any sort, or how come?
Well, remember, we are quite uniquely, individually spiritual beings. And there are many mitigating circumstances. Like me, I was struck by lightning the first time. So there wasn't a chance that I was going to have too much anesthesia, that I was going to have a reaction to it, or that I was in a situation to where it could be controlled by how much morphine I was under, or what age, or how the neurochemical reactions in the brain were. And then maybe a lot of times people block it out, because if they knew, if they chose to remember the experience, then it would keep them from finishing the job or the mission that they come to this earth to do. I think that we're all everyone tries to find a blanket answers because that's the nature of the scientific approach. When you enter spirituality and you look at it from that point, then you see that there are so many different deviations because of how each of us are unique.
All right, let's try this question. I would think a very interesting study, Dannion, would be people who, while they were here, were very spiritual people versus those who were not, and then compare the percentages of those two groups that reported near-death experiences. Wouldn't that be interesting?
Oh, there's been like 9 of those studies done in 10 countries.
Oh.
The near-death experience, it has a universal, it has universal anomalies. Things that are continuously, regardless if you were a Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, if you were atheist, communist, or I mean, I've been in 10 countries and talked to 1,000 people because I had to figure the thing out, Art. I had to know what it was.
Well, okay, is there a correlation between earthly spirituality and experiencing and recalling a near-death experience?
We all leave the world the same way. There's no...
there is or is not a connection?
There's not a connection except that you have a greater insight a lot of times. People who follow the spiritual path have in their lives crossed information that comes about in the near-death experience. I never did. I mean, I'd never heard of anything like this, and I made fun of it. And, you know, I was a really cynical jerk, so when it happened to me, I had no resources to draw from. I had no conscious way. The second time it happened to me during open-heart surgery, I had like 2 days to get ready for it. And so I looked at every possible aspect. Maybe I would have one, maybe I wouldn't. You know, who knows what those were.
Did you want one?
Well, I didn't want to make it through it. See, what I kept hoping, I refused to have the surgery. You know, I lay there 3 or 4 days dying until it got down to the last hours, and they found that Raymond Moody, and he came to see me. And Raymond and I have been friends a really, really long time. And I can remember looking up into Raymond's face as he watched me laugh and blood run out of my nose and my mouth because of the damage to my heart, and the aortic valve was so damaged. And I can remember a face that he made that I never did understand until I asked him later. And he says, you know, he says, listen, Dannion, we've been friends for 15 years. And I've heard people talk about the near-death experience over and over and over again, and that all of them say they're not afraid of dying. He said, being so close to you and knowing you and watching you laughing and refusing to sign the papers, and that you were dying because I'm a doctor and I'm talking to your doctors. He said, I saw a place of a person who was no longer afraid. So I refused. It was Raymond who came. I was leaving this world. I talked to my parents, my dad, my brother, my sister, the people that I really loved. I told them I told my father how I wanted everything to be divided up, and that there was nothing on this earth that was going to keep me here. I am out of this place. I'm out of here.
So you wanted to go?
Absolutely. You know, people don't understand. This is a job. We come and we do it. Our responsibility now is to help change the world. Remember that in Saved by the Light, which I detailed the prophecies, the future, just where the banking, the two commercials that you just did, it's a wonderment about you, Art Bell. You have some of the best commercials because do you realize that the United States government has a bill before Congress that literally, it's called the Kessenbaum-Kennedy bill.
Yes.
It has a clause in it that states that it would make it a criminal act for a physician or his patient to practice alternative medicines of anything not approved by the medical establishment.
I've heard that.
And they're voting on it, and everyone should write their congressman.
I believe it's 7 years possibly in prison. Isn't that the penalty?
That's exactly what it is.
Right.
And we have to alert people to that because I believe, Art, that without us establishing our freedom in our own medical treatments and what we go after, we were losing a battle that is one of the serious, most important battles for the quality of human dignity that will ever come about. And do you know also that one of my predictions that came about that I had was where America would be?
Yes, that is what I want to ask you about.
Watch this 2002 thing that they were seeing in your commercial.
Oh, yes, but I would like to ask you specifically what you saw. What you saw in terms of prophecy, what could be, not necessarily what will be.
Oh, absolutely not necessarily what will be, but because at the end of going through, I went through the near-death experience panoramic life review. I went to a place I call Crystal Cities or Cities of Knowledge. I was met by 13 beings of light. Each of these beings sent messages at me, and I would all of a sudden be living in it. You know, and a lot of people who know me, I predicted Chernobyl. I mean, in 1975 and 76, I wrote down this 117 things, all from Chernobyl to Desert Storm.
All right, well, let's deal with Chernobyl. Just as how did you see that? In what manner did
I saw an explosion, and then I saw people dying, and I knew it was a nuclear facility because I'd seen the 3 Mile Island deal with the stacks, the cooling towers.
Right.
And I saw radiation, and I was seeing mutations, and I was seeing children dying, and I was seeing abandoned places in this big explosion. And I knew it was called wormwood. Now, I didn't know that back then, because I didn't speak Russian or Ukrainian, that wormwood, which is a bittersweet herb that's used for digestion in tonics or natural remedies, that the Ukrainian word for wormwood is Chernobyl. And I just wrote all this down. I said the Soviet Union would collapse in 1989 as part of it. I said that America would go to war in the early parts of 1990, and it would be in the Middle East, and it would be called Storm something. I mean, and I said that by 1995, America would be in a place in economic collapse because of literally a conspiracy.
Dannion, how did you, this manner of recording, you wrote these things down, and how do we know, in other words, did somebody else see them? Did you put them in print? Did you publish them? All of this done?
Oh, no, this went on in the early days, Art. I met with Dr. Raymond Moody. These were conversations that he recorded on tape.
Oh,
that we,
good. That's
I mean,
important.
there are cassette tapes that exist of this conversation from 1975.
Okay, good.
And not only that, in the early days, Art, when these psychiatrists and doctors, I've been around since the first day, since Raymond's first book. I've been around Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, Raymond Moody, Bruce Grayson, Michael Sabom, Ken Ring, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, Melvin Morris, all the most noted researchers in the world. George Ritchie, who I think is one of the people who've really made it possible for people to. He was a psychiatrist and a doctor who taught at the University of Virginia, who first got Raymond interested in near-death experiences. Who's written 2 really good books about it, and having conversations with these people. Plus, when things would start happening, because Raymond Moody and I have been such good friends for so long, he would tell them. I didn't tell people.
All right, with such a good track record, Dannion, the obvious question to ask is about the as-yet unfulfilled prophecies. In other words, what's yet to come?
We lived to 2000 in the event. I went to the year 2004. But remember what it's predicated on, Art. That between the year 2004 and 2014, and somewhere between 2011 and 2012, that the nature of how we exist and experience ourselves as physical beings will become highly spiritually evolved. There is almost like, they say the dawn of the Aquarian Age, the end of the Mayan calendar, the Hopis.
Yes.
Okay, all that stuff points toward an event. Right now, our consciousness is accelerating. We are becoming far more intuitive, and our perspectives are changing right now.
Yes.
And so if this is speeding up and this is happening, why? Because there is an energy form that is coming toward the Earth again that hasn't been around in a while. So between now and 2004, it's really the shakeout period. We will either take hold and recapture our lives and recapture our own selves and recapture our own health care and recapture this government and prepare to try to negotiate the end of wars so that this golden age comes, or we will be at war. One of the key factors that people talk, they see the things that have come true, and just recently, I said in 1986 there'd be a nuclear explosion, and then in 1995 there would be another nuclear accident. All this is written down, and there's 1,000 people who knew. Art, I've been here 20 years. I didn't just walk up and make this stuff up. I have a 20-year history in newspaper articles and events and the early researchers. And when I didn't start out to be a prophet, I believed that I saw these events so that I would have nowhere to run, that I would have to stay, I would have to work on the centers, and at a certain point in time, I would have to be positioned and position myself to protect the rights of those people leaving this world.
All right, Dannion, hold it right there.